Want to stop talking to be great? Go ahead and sit down. You're not staying for my talk? That's jacked up, dude. See ya.
I've seen your talk 100 times.
Oh, ouch. Boo. Hi. Or I'm tall. Thank you. Can you hear me okay now? Yay. All right, so I submitted this talk a while ago, and I couldn't think of a name for it, so that's what I picked. It was a pretty horrible name. And then later on I had a better name, and I forgot to ask them to change it. That's my better name. Can you? Ooh. Right? All right. So, that's me. What is Orion? So Orion is this unified IT monitoring with the SolarWinds Orion platform with network performance monitor and server application monitor. If you say monitor one more time, I'm going to slap you. Right? So what does this thing actually do? It has all these things. And these pictures and stuff is stolen straight from the SolarWinds website. But the thing is, as a pen tester, when I see something like this, my eyes kind of glaze over, right? They're like, more infographics, yay. But I did notice a few things. It does Network Configuration Manager. Cool. Virtualization Manager, right? Hey, Network Configuration Manager. Virtualization Manager. It does these really cool things. I want to manage that kind of stuff. And then this thing at the bottom. Centralized settings and access control. Ooh, fun. So I got really interested in this thing. So the reason I got really interested in this thing was because I was on a test. I was on a pen test, and one of the things that normally I do on tests is looking around for, SQL or any kind of databases, because that's where the data is. It's in the name. So I found this database, and I did what I normally do, is look for credentials or passwords or user fields or whatever in there. And I found this data, and it looked like it was encrypted because it had a little encrypted checkbox next to it, because that's what crypto does, right? That's how it works. You check the box and you're encrypted. And then I tried to figure it out. I tried to figure out if it's hashed, if it's salted, if it does all these things, and I spent probably 2 full days trying to figure out what the crypto algorithm for this thing was. And then a buddy of mine said, "You're being stupid. Why don't you just download the trial and check it out yourself?" So I did. And this is what came of that. Yay, evaluation time. It's awesome when people allow you to download their products for free and try them out. So that's what I did. But one of the things that really irks me is, every single technical talk that I've ever seen is all about, hey, if you find this thing, then you can do these awesome things. And they never talk about how you find it. It's all about, hey, once you get here, you can do all these things. But they never tell you about how to get there. It's really frustrating. So, this is how you find it. And so this is a TCP view dump of it, but I'll get more into it. So that's a scan of it, Nmap scan. So we're going to take out the actual Microsoft stuff. It's installed on Microsoft Windows Server. Anyone notice anything important in here? Any interesting things? What would you key in on if you were? And this is totally interactive because I'm not continuing until I hear something. Message queue, yeah, RabbitMQ, that's fun. What else? HTTP. 8787 in particular, that's the interesting one. SSDPUPNP, weird stuff, that's interesting. Well, if you go on the Orion's website, that's where the web server for this thing is. So if you look for it on the network, Nmap by default does not scan for 8787. But if you scan for it, or port scan specifically, you can find this thing pretty easily. It's also where all of the agents are talking back to. So if you're on one of the servers or workstations that have the SolarWinds agent, then you can just see it in a netstat. There's a lot of other interesting things in there too. And when I was pulling this information, I noticed that thing. 25672. Anyone know what Erlang is? It's a programming thing, right? Something like that. Anyone know what DISCC is? DISCC is a distributed C compiler. I absolutely love this binary because what it does is it takes in C code, compiles it, and spits out whatever the result was. And one of the cool things is if you ever find this on a pen test, you can tell it, hey, here are the commands to run the compiler with, and then you get code execution. Well, Ruby thought this was a great idea. So Ruby has this distributed compiler as well. And if you run it, you can do it. There's all of these, for almost every language I've ever come across, there are these distributed compilers or distributed node type things where you can just say, here, run this for me, and it does it. Now, I have not looked into this part specifically because I just found it in the back while I was waiting. But there was one thing that I found when I Googled for what this thing does. I think I'm onto something. So I'll look into that more later. I haven't looked into it yet, but that port was definitely open on my test Windows system that I had the evaluation on. So more to come later. So the first thing you got to do, getting back to the actual talk, is because you're probably like, hey, why don't you stay on that track? No, is authenticate to the web app. So 8787. What do you think the default account is? Admin, you are wrong. You would fail to log in. Admin blank. You guys tried too hard. So the cool thing is that it is admin blank, but they do force you to change it in later versions. If you're still doing old versions, then you are not as lucky. Because I did find admin blank on the assessment. So getting back to this, where are all those credentials stored? Because this thing, what it does is asset management. It has to have credentials to do that. Guess what it manages? VMware ASX credentials, SNMP v3 credentials, Windows credentials, Orion credentials. So the first thing I did was, hey, if I'm logged into this thing as admin blank, I should be able to look at the credentials, right? I should be able to just pull it out and, look at the box and it shows me all the credentials because that's how things work normally, right? Unfortunately, they do it pretty decent. It does not reflectively load the actual credentials into the password change box or the current password credential. That's great on them. But then I started looking around on the trial version and seeing what binaries there were inside the program files and said, I can't find the SQL manager for this thing. Like, it's not installed by default, but it's managing the database somehow. And there in the directory was database management.exe. Awesome. Let's load it up. Notice anything, like, you guys obviously didn't just double click this, but this is the first window I saw when I double clicked that binary. I didn't have to authenticate. It's amazing. Plus, they have this little button, add default server, boom, and it just works even if you're not authenticated. So how does that work? Well, I'm not going to worry about that for right now. I'm looking for the credentials. And then I found this directory, or this database, and it said credential. And I'm not as observant as you guys probably are. I said, where are the stupid creds? They're not in here. Can't find them. Until a buddy of mine, who was also on the test, said, hey, look one more down. There's credential property. I'm like, oh. So I looked in. Oh, you guys can't see that very well, can you? I'm sorry. It looks awesome on my screen. So I looked in, and there's Uber user, my awesome user. It has encrypted, has the password in there, and that's exactly what I saw on the test. So I said, awesome, I'm on the right track. So how do they encrypt these things? I got to figure out how they do things. So I looked in the directory again. and they had this wonderfully titled DLL called security.dll. Awesome. I was going to look for encrypt.dll, but it wasn't there either, so security should do it, right? Anyone know what this tool is? It's called DNSpy, a lot like ILSpy. Basically, they are decompilers for C# code. So I dragged and dropped the DLL into DNSpy, and when that happens, I became a reverse engineer. Yeah, I love you guys. All right, I saw that coming, right? So when you look in there, when you look in DNSpy or any of the or ILSpy, it'll decompile this stuff unless it's obfuscated. DNSpy does a pretty good job at deobfuscating code, but there are ways to make C# a lot harder to see. Obviously, SolarWinds did not do this, which is a recommendation for later. But anyone notice anything interesting down here? No? It's hard to see. Sorry. It looks great on my screen. I'll make it bigger for you. So there's the decrypt function. Awesome, great. I can decrypt things. Looks like a really small function, right? So I had to go deeper and find decrypt XML and decrypt short. And then I found that it was certificate based. Wah, wah. So now I have to figure out what kind of certificate this thing has. I mean, it is 128, 256, cipher, CBC, but it uses a certificate to do things. That really sucks. So let's find the cert. Where is the cert? Oh, there it is. It's in the system store for the service. But it couldn't be exportable, right? They don't make things exportable like that. Like, that would be a security risk. Oh yeah. You can get the private key, you can put it on your own system, and you have it forever. You only have to be admin to do it. The certificate doesn't ever change, even with revisions. So the same certificate was installed in revision, I think, I don't remember the version numbers anymore. I think it was like version 5, all the way up to version 14, or whatever the versions are. So on the client themselves, during the test, they had tons of different versions that they had gone through, and there was the same cert as installed based on the certificate generation date from the first install of the application. So it is generated per install, though. So you got a little bit there. It's not like everyone has the exact same cert across every single install, which would have been really bad. So let's decrypt it. And here's my awesome coding skills. Copy, paste, generate code, done. And there's my password. Cool. Except for you don't have to be an admin to do it. You don't have to be system to do it. You don't have to be anything to do it. You can use the cert as any user on that box. Awesome. So if you get code execution or console access that the web app allows, or SQL access that the SQL server allows, you can then just parse the actual certificate and decrypt it. But they couldn't use these for everything else, right? They couldn't use the same certificate for every single set of different creds on the box, right? That would be bad. Yep. They encrypted the same way. So just copy and paste and there you go. But wait, did you catch that back here? There's this password field. That doesn't look like a password, does it? What do you guys think that is? It's not base 64. I know. What do you guys think that is? It's a bunch of numbers. Maybe hex? Could be. But all those look about the same, and they're different length passwords. So that's not hex. So I looked in and tried to find where this thing happened. And I saw this really cool comment in the code. Can you guys read it? Here, I'll make it bigger. Do not use this decrypt algorithm. It is not FIPS compliant. Use hash password instead. So it's commented in the code to not to use it. So why is it even in the database? Why is it being used at all? Well, because you don't have FIPS compliance turned on. Anyone ever turn on FIPS compliance on a Windows box? It basically breaks everything. And they warn you, saying, hey, this could break things. It does. I'm exaggerating, but like calc wouldn't even work. Like there's tons of stuff that just didn't work after that. So I looked and it said, don't use this. But if you looked at the code, it used it right after the actual hash, right before the hash password thing that it told it to use. So the coder said to himself, hey, this is a bad way of doing things. And then another coder said, hey, I'm just going to use this anyways. Like, they're right next to each other. There's no if FIPS compliant. There's no, like, don't do this if the other one's there. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I copied and pasted the code, and I got a really weird response. My password was all uppercase. Like, wait, I've seen this before. I've seen this before. And no. They wouldn't allow you to log in that way, right? They don't allow you to log in to SolarWinds Orion, this awesome enterprise level product that the US, that a lot of people use with an uppercase password, right? Oh yeah, they do. So, yeah, finding number 2, easily reversible encrypted password, quote unquote encrypted. It doesn't use any of the system data certificate. It is disabled when FIPS compliance is disabled, but FIPS basically breaks everything. And essentially all it is bit flipping. So it takes the password, uppercases it first for some weird reason, and then does a bunch of bit flipping that you can just copy and paste. And now if you have access to that database, you get all the passwords for Orion. Then you can log in, and then you can use the CERT to decrypt all the other passwords, and then you're done. I wasn't done. I wanted all the passwords. And one of those passwords was the database password. I remembered that I had just double-clicked that stupid little binary, and it logged me in automatically. So where does that? Anyone ever use Bullet's PassView? It's a Nersoft tool. Don't trust Nersoft, but I did on this occasion. It was in a VM, so I don't care. It allows you to look at the bulleted stuff. So there was the password inside of the configuration wizard for the database, and I had the password. But it has to get there somehow. It has to get it from somewhere, right? So I used a bunch of other tools that had something to do with the database, including the configuration wizard. And it showed me all of these the password multiple times. I kept trying to figure out where it came from. Like the configuration wizard wasn't showing me. The database manager wasn't showing me where it was getting this stupid password from. And it wasn't in the database, obviously. So I went on Process Monitor and tried to view where it was coming from. And I finally dug deep enough to see where it was loading the password database, or the password for the database from, the SQL database, MS SQL. So what kind of database do you guys think this SWNETPERFMON.DB password database thingamajig is in? Access database? Flat text? SQLite? Fox? DB? What do you guys think? Not even that cool. You guys are right. Flat text file. It literally had connection string equals in the text file. But, hold on. Before you guys laugh, it looks encrypted, right? Nope. So it's encrypted with the certificate just like it was. The The Orion guys say it wasn't encrypted with the certificate, but in my instance, for some reason, it was. They say it's DP API, but it can't be DP API because I'm using it as a standard user to get the database, and it wouldn't work that way because Windows doesn't work that way. So they say it's DP API. I say it's the crypto certificate. We'll see who's the right answer, I guess, when they start suing me. No screenshot approved because the old configurations were as a client site, but what happens when you install a new version of SolarWinds Orion is it just moves in the database file, it moves the connection string instead of replacing it down and adds a new one. And then down and adds a new one. And do you think they were always encrypting all of the database connection strings? So on this specific client, they had 15, 20 connection strings to different databases they had used, including a dev one, over the years. That passwords probably still worked. And it stayed in this file. So they don't remove anything. Alright, so here's the results. So the fixes is to make the RSA key that is there in the Orion database non-exportable. The storage of creds is easier reversible format. Just enable FIPS compliance, because that's the only answer I have right now. Unfortunately, that's not an easy thing to do. What I would recommend is separating the actual SolarWinds website and an application from the database. So if it's not on the same box, then you can't do SQL-based stuff to get the key out, or the certificate out. And once you do change it to FIPS compliance or do that, make sure that the passwords are at least changed once so that the password field that is now disabled is no longer used. Make sense? Just like LM and NTLM, if you don't change the password even though you disable LM, the password for the LM, or the hash for the LM password is still there and still valid. And then clear out your SWNETPERFMON database with old connection strings. Now, one thing I will talk about that I briefly talked about at KiwiCon when I gave this talk was there is a pretty vexing and horrible denial of service vulnerability here. Can anyone think of what it might be? What could you do to this box to make sure it never worked again? Turn on FIPS compliance. That's funny, I should have used that. No. Delete the CERT. They can't regenerate the same CERT. If that CERT goes away, that box and the encrypted passwords are gone. So, and the system itself won't work anymore because it can't connect to the database, because it can't decrypt the password. So you're out of commission for at least a little while. So be careful with your SolarWinds boxes. Generic solutions here are ensure the Orion server is protected as much as possible. This thing holds your credentials for access controls and all of the passwords for Windows boxes and ESX boxes and all the fun stuff. Make sure it doesn't have access to anything that it's not supposed to. Generic, security, security, security. Right? Does this make sense? Yes. And make sure that you firewall off the 25762 port, because I'm going to be playing with that shortly. Now, when I started working down this talk, I submitted to both BSides Philly and KiwiCon, and the KiwiCon people put up the abstract way before I was ready to, and the SolarWinds representative for their security people reached out and said, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And they were great about it. They were awesome. I was doing a lot of traveling at that time. They were really considerate of all of the delays that it took me to get them information. I finally sent them all the information. They were like, "Yeah, we understand some of these. These are part of our security best practices. Yeah, we have the other things ready to fix. So if you hear or see this talk either recorded or now, I urge you to go talk to your SolarWinds representative and ask them about the security best practices for these specific issues. See if they have anything better than enable FIPS compliance, because that would be awesome. One request that I haven't asked specifically about to them is and I realized later, is that their interface does not enable two-factor authentication in any way, shape, or form. And this is one of the biggest qualms I have with almost all security products. Our security products these days, across the board, 90% of them at least have zero ability to add security to them, like two-factor authentication. We have these great incident response tools like Splunk is one example that does have it, right? There are a ton of these different features and great products out there, sort of great products, okay products out there for security that don't have two-factor authentication or any kind of multi-factor authentication. Please ask your vendors to add it, or if you are one, please have that ability, because if you're not, I'm sorry I'm staying on my soapbox a bit, but if you're not enabling security with your security product, then you're more of a problem and you are the target. So, without completing my talk right now, if I completed my talk right now, it would be a failed talk because I don't have a meme, I don't have a Sun Tzu quote, and our cat picture. Thank you very much. I went really fast, didn't I? Nice. Questions, comments, concerns, hate mail. Yeah. So it wasn't Landman. It was an encoding of sorts. So they were doing bit flipping on the password. They were upcasing first, doing some bit flipping, which was really complex. It took me a while to figure out what it was doing, and then I gave up and just copied it. But it wasn't exactly Landman. It wasn't that. It was turning it into these numbers, and it was just ones and zeros and nines and fives and whatever with dashes. So it wasn't exactly Landman. It wasn't there for backwards compatibility for Windows. It was there for backwards compatibility for the old SolarWinds products. And one of the scariest things, are we stopping recording?